Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of the 360 Compliance Virtual Summit. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you all. When AML Watcher came to me with the idea for this summit, I was like, guys, this is a lot to pack in to 3 days. It's a lot of coordination. I'm not really sure that we can pull this off. And I have to say, I love to acknowledge it when I'm wrong. And I was absolutely wrong. Well, actually, I should probably wait till we get through day 3 before I say that. But honestly, in all transparency, massive congratulations to be and the entire marketing team for pulling this together, and to all of our guests as well for stepping up, because in the back end, I can tell you the organization has been nothing short of phenomenal. So I just wanted to say thank you where thanks is due, and also to admit that I got it wrong, because, you know, we all have those days and those moments. So today is day 3, and day 3, the big focus is fraud. As we know, fraud is for me, it's the modern day pandemic. It's today's COVID. Fraud and illicit activity typologies, I wouldn't say that they're increasing in their sophistication, but they are increasing in respect of their ability to attack vulnerable people, because of a lot of the psychological elements that are involved, and also, very importantly, the technology that's being deployed by illicit actors. And one thing we always say is to remember that the illicit actors have the same access to the same technology that we have. So when we're looking and we're talking today, and we're going to talk through various aspects, deep fakes, etc., one of the things we need to be mindful of is illicit actors also have access to the same technology. And it's really, really about education and awareness for the general public. And then it is about both protectionism and detection in respect of financial institutions, and having the right tools in place. So on that note, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Daniel, who is joining us this morning. Daniel, would you like to take just a quick minute to introduce yourself, a little bit of background about yourself, and also the organization that you're working with?
All right, thank you so much, Veena, for having me over. And sure, so my name is Daniel, as you rightly mentioned, and I'm CTO at Fascia. A bit of a background. So, I did my master's from London, from Queen Mary University of London, in big data science. So, since then onwards, I've been working in fintech, and I was, really focused and really interested in how to, detect different sort of frauds. Then from there on, we created this platform, this solution called Fascia, which primarily works with faces, right? Now, the initial idea was to detect whether the person is a real person or not. We just kept it very simple, right?
Yep.
We just wanted to detect whether this person is alive, or someone is wearing a mask, or someone is showing a paper picture. We just wanted to verify the realness of the person. Then slowly we proceeded to other aspects of faces, face matching, matching faces with an identity card, a passport, or any other selfie. Then other aspects, age estimations. And recently, just a year or two ago, we dived into deep fake detection as well. you know Probably none of us have heard, we didn't hear the word deep fake about 5-10 years ago. This
Yeah.
is a new phenomenon, right? Deep fake detection. Fraud is a generic term, but deep fake is actually creating some sort of a fake image, right? That's the new sort of a fraud that's happening out there in the world. And you know we at Fascia really have dived into to detect all sorts of sophisticated deep fake attacks, all sort of fraud attacks that could happen with the faces of human beings. Because at the end of the day, the face is your identity. It's as simple as that. You could have your multiple passports, you could have your multiple driver's license, anything, but this face is your real identity. You need to protect this, you need to verify, you need to show this face. So yeah.
I look after every day, Daniel. Don't you worry. I look after. I should get it insured. I'm joking. No, but on that, obviously, what is happening in the world of deep fakes is pretty phenomenal. I think everybody's familiar with the CFO example in Hong Kong, where 2 weeks into the job, the CFO was in a virtual meeting with colleagues. And in that virtual meeting, obviously being brand new to the organization, they were instructed to make certain payments to the value, I believe, of approximately 21 million US dollars. What was interesting about that example was that the entire meeting wasn't actually completely in deep fake territory. What happened was it started initially with the deep fakes, i.e. that the only real person on the call was the CFO, the CEO, everybody else in that meeting was fake. But after, I believe, around 5 minutes or so, due to technical interruptions, they then diverted to using just voice discussions in the virtual meeting. But that was it was a very frightening example because you're 2 weeks into a job. You're not familiar with the protocols, the processes in your organization, and when your CEO, together with other senior executive leadership, is instructing you to make certain transactions, you're going to do that. In all honesty, I would like to meet somebody that would question that. Obviously, that's something we do need to question nowadays. But why go from, if we look inside the algorithms and we take what it takes to detect deep fakes now in 2025, because as you've mentioned, this has evolved significantly from just, from what it was previously to what it is now. Why go from liveness detection to off-site deepfake detection?
This is a very good question. So why go from just a liveness detection to deepfake detection? So, what liveness detection, we need to understand the difference between the two first, right? Liveness detection and deepfake detection. Liveness detection primarily focuses on proving whether this is not a selfie on an external mobile phone. It's not a paper attack. It's not an external mask you're wearing. So liveness detection has some certain limitations that different algorithms check. Deepfake detection is a different ballgame altogether, right? Every single day, you keep on hearing different generative AI tools that have the capability and the capacity to create realistic faces that are pretty hard to distinguish from whether they are a real face or whether they are a deep fake. I'll give you a small example, right? About 2 to 3 years ago, there was a video where Will Smith was eating Chinese noodles, right? And you could see that this is pretty cartoonish, animatorish, sort of a
Yes.
video. And recently, the same prompt creates such a realistic video of the same actor eating noodles that's really it's frightening whether he's actually real Will Smith or it's just a prompt, right? Within a gap of 2 years, you can see the amount of advancement, the technological advancement, the algorithm advancement, the GPUs, the availability of the GPUs to everyone and each and every one, the availability of open source algorithms. Anyone could create deepfakes with just a single sentence. It looks easy, but it is pretty frightening, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for all positivity, content creators have managed to decrease their workload, increase their productivity. They can use different different tools to create contents and
Yeah.
everything. But at the same time, if it falls into bad actors, or if it falls into wrong hands, it can have devastating effects.
Yeah.
So coming
Absolutely.
back to the question, why liveness? Why go from liveness to deep fake detection? If someone creates a deep fake with just a prompt and tries to bypass a financial transaction. That in that transaction, you'd have to check whether this person is live, as well as this person is not a deep fake and he or she is a real person or not.
Yeah.
So deep fake detection is now a necessity on top of liveness detection,
I heard an
because
interest.
it's
Go ahead.
easily available, right?
No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I even have a virtual avatar of myself created. We call her Shiny Una because she's really shiny. And that was just to support me with making training videos. But and also you've made me really hungry talking about Chinese noodles. But anyway, back to deep fakes. But talking about statistics, and I was reading a report recently, and forgive me where it was from which report it was from, I don't recall. Digital injection and face swap attempts surged through 2024. And astonishingly, the frequency is reported as often as every 5 minutes. So this isn't actually something that's happening just in a random kind of once or twice a day. This is a serious, a type of cyber attack that's happening against organizations and infiltrating internal meetings as well within organizations. And as you rightly pointed out there, traditional liveness checks, they weren't designed to inspect, generative artifacts or model fingerprints or streaming anomalies across the full media path. But what the new kind of step towards off-site analysis, it allows us to run multi-module, as you've mentioned, detectors, video, audio, and metadata simultaneously, and cross-check device signals for virtual cameras and injection indicators. And these models, of course, as well, continually refresh against new generators. So we have moved very, very quickly from, as you rightly said, quite a simplistic approach of it didn't really look like them eating the noodles, and there were very clear kind of artifacts that you could have seen to identify that it wasn't real, to something that is so lifelike that you need this combination of video, audio, and metadata combined. And also, very importantly, and we talk about this in risk management all the time in terms of future-proofing, nothing should be static. We need continuously refreshing models. And as you know, earlier this year, I had the pleasure of I think stepping into your shoes to attend the Biometrics Summit, the European Biometrics Association Summit in Martine in Switzerland. And I felt like a fish out of water. I was the only financial services person there. The rest was kind of security, airport security, government officials. And I was just blown away by what is happening in the biometric facial recognition space at the moment. I had to say, it was a bit of I love to learn, but it was definitely an information overload session for me, because in financial services, this is something that's quite new to us as a discussion point. And as I mentioned, the CFO attack in Hong Kong is really what brought it to our attention. But I don't think financial institutions really understand the significance of what is actually happening in the market at the moment in terms of the real fundamental threat that's currently, clear and present. So what you go on from that point, obviously, we've just talked about it and touched on it. But what makes deepfake detection in 2025 fundamentally different from even just 2 years ago, Daniel?
The quick answer is data. I'll explain why I mentioned this word data. AI algorithms, they need data to be trained, right? A couple of years ago, you did not have as much data as you have today. Obviously, next year you will have a lot more data.
Yeah.
Right. Now, by data, you can get data from all sorts of different public platforms like social media,
Yeah.
Different social media platforms. You've got different Facebooks, Twitters, Instagrams, Snapchats. You've got billions of people all over the world on social media, uploading and posting different sort of their images, their videos, their voices, their audios. Then you've got different videos on different video sharing platforms. So the data has been compiling and compiling, and this sort of
Daniel,
data set.
sorry to interrupt you on that comment, because it's a really, really fundamental point. Do you believe that people are opening themselves up to attempted deepfake attacks by sharing videos on social media platforms? Do we need to rethink the availability of our image and our voice and facial components in social media? Is it a threat that we haven't really considered?
That's a good question. I think yes. The answer is yes. You need to verify. You need to make sure that your images, your faces, your videos aren't publicly exposed. I'll just give you a small example, and it'll clarify my point. Public celebrities or politicians, they are public figures. Their videos, their faces, their audios, their videos are out there in the market, are out there in the industry, on social media platforms, on videos different here and there. They are the first. Those people are the first ones who have deep fakes created, right? Public celebrities, their deep fakes are first out there in the market. I mentioned Will Smith because he is a public figure, right? his video his videos are out there in the market. People can easily extract his face, create a deep fake. But if my face is not out there on any social media platform, no one would be able to get my face, have inject my face into someone else, or have my face lips some words out of my mouth, because they won't have my face in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I'm completely, I don't stand a chance here now. I think I've noticed my faces in places I didn't even expect to see it. So, yes, you're absolutely right. One of the things you've talked about as well is so two things. We've talked about scale and quality. The volume is exploited. I talked about statistically earlier that there's a reported attempt every 5 minutes. But in terms of attacks, the attacks that were reported were up by 1,300% in 2024 just for voice alone. And facial swap attempts were up 700% year on year from 2023 to 2024, whilst consumers can only reliably spot fakes approximately 0.1% of the time. As you can see, Daniel, love a good stat. But I wanted to ask you about these stats.
Now, again, very interesting stats, but in those stats you mentioned 700% jump in the deep fakes, but the industrial capacity is only 0.1% detection.
Yeah.
So you can see, right, those 700% increase were the ones that were caught. In actual terms, I think the number is humongous. I mean, it's frightening. It could be more than 10,000%.
Yeah, you're right, because they don't have the tools to identify it.
Exactly. Because you see, the thing is that we've got different startups, different AI generative tools popping up every single day, and you've got all those sort of funding going into those platforms, which is absolutely essential for the AI industry to grow as well. But at the same time, you need some sort of tools to sort of manage and detect any sort of a fraud attempts made by those deepfakes, right?
Yeah.
You need both sides of the coin as well. You need some sort of a detecting mechanism as well.
Yeah. I love as well, one of the things I was looking at recently was regulatory comparisons on basically on an AI. And this actually came out of a kind of an SCMP report last week from Hong Kong, where the Hong Kong have issued AI regulation around social media. But the challenges they have is actually rolling out enforcement of that. And we've actually seen a comparable challenge in the EU, where we need to label AI generated or AI modified content, so deepfake content, which in one regard raises the bar for spoofing and continuous verification. But that only applies to those of us operating within a regulated regime, you know? And as we know, the illicit characters don't. So whilst it's great that we have it in paper and it's pragmatic and brilliant that we have that, we have to make sure that labeling is in place. It's not going to be labeled where it matters. And that's kind of what I'm just kind of like scratching my head at times thinking, well, what was the regulatory expectation here? Because this implementing this is going to be very challenging. So tell me, I'm very interested. Obviously, I've been to your office in Lahore. And again, as I mentioned, I went to the European Biometric Association conference earlier in the year in Martigny in Switzerland. I ended up going to a dinner where I was sitting with basically engineers and data scientists talking about facial recognition, biometric components and builds. And I have to say, it was one of those dinners where I just kind of sat there and thought, I just need wine or a glass of water. This is just over my head. I actually didn't drink any wine. I was just drinking water that evening. But can you tell us a little bit more about Fascia's algorithm and the results that you've seen in the testing that you've rolled out?
Right. So I just categorize these, algorithms and the statistics. So firstly, Fascia had liveness detection, and there's an industrial certification or industrial standard called iBeta testing, right? That's a body in the US where obviously Fascia is certified, iBeta certified as well, where they test our solution on their data set, right? And they try to bypass our solution, our system, with different sort of fraud attacks and different sort of spoof attacks.
Yep.
Now they've got two different sort of levels, level 1 and level 2. Level 2 is more sophisticated masks, realistic masks, where people wear different sort of masks and try to bypass our liveness solution. And Fascia was able to detect every single spoof attack that they performed on their testing dataset. Now, that being said, obviously, it's a good stat, and we were very proud of it that, we have 0% error rate as proven by a third body. Like, we don't claim it. They tested our solution and they obviously certified that we have 0% error rate. Deepfakes, however, is a different ballgame altogether, right?
Yeah.
There isn't a single sort of testing that sets the industry that, if you have this sort of a testing stats, then you're good to go. You have to keep on, test your system, you really push your system, really, improve your system every single day. What we've done at Fascia is that we have a separate team of testers, we have a separate team of data scientists, engineers. So the testers don't really know what sort of algorithms, what sort of data sets, what sort of models have we created. Their only job is to break our system, is to make sure that our models fail. The engineer's job is to make sure that we don't fail, right? Now, what we've primarily done is separated the two, so they don't have any visibility of the two. So they have an unbiased testing. So far, we've compiled a list of about 150 plus sources, open sources from around the world, where we create our own deepfakes, and then we test our system to check whether how well is it performing on different sort of platforms, different sort of models, different sort of algorithms, and how capable our system is to handle deepfakes in real world scenario. Because there is a test environment and there is a real world environment, right?
Absolutely.
You need to be your models need to be balanced in the real world scenario as well.
And
You
that
can't
was
have too many. you can't have too many false positives, you can't have too many false negatives. You need to ensure
And that
that
was
proper
exactly
balance.
no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That is exactly the feedback that was coming out of the Biometrics Association discussion. It was the beta testing versus real life testing. You know, we need to make sure that we are balancing the expectations of what that looks like, because you're now implementing new data sets as well into the system. And obviously that will take some configuration and, whilst systems are being implemented as well. So, this is, and that is the same with any solution in the market. And tell me this, Daniel, and I do apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, because I think what's really interesting is what are the most difficult deep fakes to catch? And how does the system stay ahead of those? Because we talked about continuous development. So, as you're doing this testing, there is a continuous increase in sophistication of the deepfake environment. So whilst you're testing, you're also having to continually develop in the background, which I think is just phenomenal, because it really just shows continuous innovation. But what today are the hardest? I think some of the ones that I've heard of are, depth-aware attacks, native virtual camera injections, multi-model spoofs. Can you talk a little bit and maybe explain this like you would explain it to a 6-year-old, just for all of us, because we're all quite new to this. So kind of take off your engineering cap and put on your, okay, how did I explain this to my child?
Right. How do I explain this to a child? So the answer is that, it changes every single day.
Yeah.
Last year, we had this face swap. You could swap your face. I could swap my face with a friend, right? And that was a different sort of challenge last year. 6 months ago, we had a different sort of a challenge where, let's suppose it was AI generated face, where just with a single prompt, using Midjourney, using any AI generated tool, you could create your face. But that was pretty cartoonish, right? That was dirty. And now, with just a single prompt, you can create a face that looks pretty realistic. I don't know what new challenge will we get tomorrow, but the challenges are, continuously changing, continuously improving, and that's what keeps us going as well. That it's not like we've stopped at one point, because we can't afford to stop at one point, right?
Yep.
It's not like deepfake just stopped right here and okay, our model's done right there and that's it. You need to ensure that you're always one step ahead. It's like, I always tell the team that it's like, we used to play this game in childhood. It's like thief and police, right? You're policing the criminals. You need to think like criminals. You need to think like thieves. Okay, how will they train their models? How would they try to bypass your system? And then you need your models to think like criminals to stop those.
Yep. It's sometimes I think the challenge is you can feel a little bit, and I hope I don't say this in the wrong context, but in our job at times, it can become, if you start to feel a little bit schizophrenic, because you're constantly, you do one thing and then you question it. And it's like, and you constantly have to second guess whether or not that is sufficient. What you built yesterday is sufficient today. And what I'm loving about the developments in cybersecurity is that they are continuous. And it's one of the biggest failures, if I'm perfectly honest, in traditional anti-money laundering, because we created static risk assessments, which we've built controls upon, and those controls are very rarely updated, whether it's from a KYC perspective or a transaction monitoring perspective. And we need to move to a live model of continuous deployment of new typologies and updates, and having our risk assessments to be living, breathing documents that are constantly feeding through, and this is where I love to deploy AI, suggestive kind of examples of where we can improve based on our top and emerging risks within our landscape. And that's why management information is so important. One last question before we move on to the next section, which I know that everybody is going to be thinking about. So if we are continually improving, obviously, one of the biggest challenges will be the volume of false positives, because the system has to constantly be recalibrated. And that is a traditional problem in banking with, for example, transaction monitoring systems. When you roll them out, then you calibrate them, you fine tune them, and then they start to reduce the false positives. Well, if you're using rules and scenarios, that never really reduces anyway. Or should I say the reliability of the system doesn't change. But obviously in this type of scenario, we need to balance detection sensitivity without becoming unreliable or indeed ineffective. So what would be your kind of recommendations to organizations who are now looking to implement this in terms of rolling this out, such as kind of policy alignment, tiered thresholds, and I know we've talked about it as well, and kind of multi-signal collaborations. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So in my opinion, right, you don't want to annoy the user and you don't want to let the bad actor pass through.
Yeah.
Right? You need to strike that balance where you catch all the frauds and you let all the proper verifications pass through. You need to let all the real verifications pass through. Now that has been the most important question for different sort of solutions of how to strike that proper balance, because some solutions move really towards striking that perfect security where they make where they how do I say this, they focus too much on security that the false positive rates increase too much.
Yes.
Other solutions, they focus too much on the user-friendly side that they allow, the deep fix to bypass. That is a very, really important question. And that is something that, we're really striving on for every single day, that, our models, our solution should be capable enough to handle all sort of sophisticated attacks.
Yes.
Nothing is 100%, to be very honest. Nothing in the world is 100%, because, if I read a paper on AI, on deepfakes yesterday, there'll be a new tomorrow. Now, how do I ensure that, if a paper is released today, I'll have the model ready to detect that model today?
Yeah.
There'll always be some sort of a lag. There'll always be some sort of improvement, but your system should be capable enough to handle that. If not today, then tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that's where kind of the practical tiering thresholds, for example, allowing with step up, deny, manual review, tuned per risk segment as well. So this is where I get excited. The beauty of risk management and cybersecurity comes together. And this is what we talk about, no longer operating within silos within organizations, is that we need risk management and the cybersecurity team to be working hand in hand on this to make sure that we're fine-tuning this to our potential risk exposure and where we're seeing that risk developing and emerging within our organizations. So thank you. So Daniel, I think based on time, if you don't mind, we're going to jump now to section 2, really looking at deepfake detection in the real world. I think we've really addressed kind of why traditional liveness checks are failing in today's deepfake fraud world. I think we've really kind of talked about that because of the increase in sophistication and how it has moved so quickly. But we've also touched on, I even brought up the fact about being at the European Biometrics Association, and I was the only person from financial services in the room. Everybody else, as I mentioned, was government officials, engineers, data scientists, security, whether it's airport governance, etc. But deepfakes is not only a problem for social media or for customs and, passport control. Other industries, financial services, iGaming, on-demand platforms, age-restricted commerce, remote hiring, KYB, they're all facing this risk exposure. So why do you think that we're not talking about this more? Because this is something, I'll be honest with you, and I'm not sure if our attendees today will agree with me on this, but we've only started talking about deepfakes since the documented case in Hong Kong. But yet, I don't think I don't think many organizations are taking it as seriously as they should be right now.
I mean, it's true, there isn't that much noise around deepfake detection or the threat of deepfake as it should be. And personally, I think there aren't enough laws around the world that are protecting the consumers and citizens, their data. And there should be more debates about how to stop these deepfake detections and what can be done, what laws could be implemented. Obviously, there countries have started to notice this as well. You've got different online safety act in the UK, you've got different states in the US, you've got different countries in Southeast Asia where they're protecting different teenagers to restrict the use of social media. There are now governments are noticing this, but it's not with the same scale, with the same pace as it should be.
Yeah, you mentioned data protection there, Daniel, and that was a real. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So you also mentioned about different industries, right? iGaming, KYC, fintech. Another industry that that really surprised me as well is where you've got different digital courtrooms out there in the world, right? Where you'd have to submit different sort of digital evidence.
Yeah.
Now people don't realize that those evidence could be deepfakes as well. Now, how do you really analyze those evidence, whether they are real or whether they are deepfakes? Anyone could, for example, anyone could have my deepfake saying anything that I didn't say. Now, how do they analyze and how do they really tell whether this was a real person or this was a deepfake? Now, there are so many industries that are really affected by deepfakes that it's not just a single industry problem. It's not just KYC problem. It's not just.
I think that the legal side is actually going to be a really interesting one in terms of prosecution and successful prosecution. And you're absolutely right. There is a massive. I used to always make the joke that I have hair extensions, and I'm a big fan of watching CSI and all of these TV shows, and I just thought, if I committed a murder, but I left behind, a strand of my hair, but it was from the extensions, would the person who the hair belonged to originally be found guilty? How would they know it's me? And it's just like a silly joke, like it would. But the truth is, nowadays, because of the sophistication, real life like videos can be created with your image on them, and reputations and legal issues reputations can be destroyed and legal issues can arise just because somebody has created a deepfake video, which looks so real. And after that kind of horse has bolted the stable, there's no kind of pulling back the impact that this is going to have on the individual or indeed publicly to their reputation. So yeah, I think, but the truth is, you talked about data protection and more regulation and laws around data protection. The problem we have is there are very good and stringent, for example, GDPR data protections, but that's protecting how organizations are using our data. But when we're freely giving our data away in social media platforms, those laws and regulations are going to do nothing to protect us. Celebrity one is a great example. Once they're outside in the public arena, videos will be taken, they will be interviewed, voices will be captured, and that is all that's needed in order to commence the build of these deep fakes. So it's actually a really, really interesting academic discussion as well, and one that I'm definitely going to take offline to have, because it's something I'm generally now excited about, and even more so having spoken with you today. And we talked as well about the risk that's facing financial institutions, where people are going to. We actually saw a case in, and this isn't even a deep fake case, but bypassing biometric scanning for bank accounts. There was a case in China a couple of years ago where the individual realized if they merely wore a Ronald McDonald wig, like the big curly McDonald, clown wig, that it would completely, fembot, so to speak. I don't know if you've seen Austin Powers, where the fembots kind of explode because it's system overload. It would confuse the system so much that they were, and there was my computer screen zooming right into me as I say that. I have to try and go back again. I'll give you a second. And it was confusing the system so much that they were able to bypass the biometric scanning for the bank accounts. So until this was uncovered, that individual was able to make away with a sum of money. Obviously, we now see the fact that a lot of financial institutions are using biometric capabilities for people to log into bank accounts. And a very interesting discussion I actually had last week with Dr. Nicola Harding, who's a criminologist in the UK. What she was telling me was testing some banking systems. There was, and again, I know people who are on the platform today will have heard me discuss this already. Testing those systems, what she discovered was that when you use biometric scanning, if somebody has stolen your phone and has the password to get into your telephone, they can change your biometrics, capabilities within your telephone immediately. And then they will log into some of your online banking platforms, which also in some instances connect. If you have a Premier account, it connects you to other, banking accounts that you may have. And they can pull the monies from your other bank accounts before you've even had a chance to actually report that your phone has been stolen. So there is so much, we really need deep fake detection within, and also some banks actually have the ability to there you go, zooms out. That's the cue. Some banks have biometric capabilities to see when biometric information in your phone has changed, so that they can actually require you to re-verify through, taking a picture of your government issued ID, etc., sending you through various, 2FA sources, to authentication sources, information to make sure that they can authenticate the change. What is the risk to, in particular, financial services and the legal profession and law enforcement, of not having deepfake detection as part of their identity system today?
I mean, what's the risk? The risk is, you're opening the floodgates to, allowing people to just walk in through, create a simple deep fake, bypass the system, and just go on with it. I mean, it's not. So how I'll term is deepfake detection is now not just a nice to have, solution. It's a must have solution right now, because every single person can create a deepfake with just one single sentence.
Yep.
With any open source, with any tool, any website, it's as easy. It's as easy as just typing one sentence.
Yep.
You don't need massive GPUs. You don't need massive infrastructure. You don't need a massive sort of a computer system. You just need to type in one sentence, and that's it. Now, this might, I don't know, but it is pretty frightening, that anyone can create any sort of a deep fake. And if they can create any sort of a deep fake, then that deep fake could bypass any sort of financial institution. It can be utilized for any, banking account, any crypto account, any iGaming account. It could be used for any duplication account. The use cases are multiple, but
Yeah.
that's why we think that deepfake detection is now a must-have solution. That it's the maximum layer of security that these financial institutions, these gaming institutions, these gaming platforms need to have to ensure that there is no such bad actor out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talking then to the actual use cases and what we're seeing, we've mentioned fintech, crypto firms, financial institutions, TradeFi. We really need to step up deepfake detection screen at onboarding, but also when risk signals spike. I mean, we talked to that earlier as well. iGaming, obviously, the big focus there is age and kind of geographic compliance, plus payout checks with face swaps and voice clone detection. So, are you seeing a lot of implementation of the tools and a lot of uptake of the usage of deepfake tools within those two specific sectors?
Yes, because so I'll tell you the demographics of what sort of people mostly play games, right? There are gamers, there are iGaming platforms. Those are the kind of people who are slightly more technologically advanced than other people out there in the world, right? They have the tools, they have the capacity and the capability of creating slightly more sophisticated sort of attacks, deepfake attacks than other people, right? They aren't just right. They won't just write a single prompt. They'll actually invest time to create more sophisticated deepfakes, and that's why we have seen huge surge in iGaming platforms, integrating solutions like ours, like Facia, for deepfake detection, where they check whether the player is not a duplicate, whether he's not an underage, whether he's not a deepfake. There are multiple checks that they need to ensure that this player is authentic for for him or her to have a proper payout or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, just before we jump into section 3, then I think just very three kind of fast proofs, if I may, just to kind of enterprises are generally risk adverse, and obviously there is a very long kind of procurement and due diligence process for organizations for them to test the value of implementing solutions and also the capabilities of the technology. So there obviously is a back testing on historical data which is needed. There is obviously we need real, a kind of, I suppose, a red team with current generators to replicate modern threats. But we also need kind of prevention loss versus friction. We need to make sure that we can give assurance to satisfy compliance and risk teams through that testing, but also as well that we're not impeding just business day to day. But again, there is no difference with the implementation of this type of technology than any other technology. The only difference is that this is going to be the first technology that continuously updates and changes, whereas opposed to technology that we've used in the past, which will now change, will also have to adopt the same continuous, increment model. And this is something where I'm really, really passionate about financial institutions employing a chief AI officer within their organization to oversee this deployment so they can understand how can we implement these systems with the least friction, but with the maximum success and efficiency across the organization. And most importantly, data. Like, what data points do we need? Do we have the right data? Do we need to collect more data? So sorry, I just thought I'd mention it because we've talked about all of that as well. And obviously ensuring full compliance with kind of transparency controls under various regulatory AI environments. So jumping into from enterprise to everybody, adding the consumer, the individual on the street into this. Why now? Why bring deepfake detection to consumers? Like, what has changed? Is it the prevalence of the deepfake growth? Or is it, as you mentioned as well, the harm and policy focus and the abuse?
So it's a bit of everything. It's the availability of the tools to everyone. And you mentioned at the start of our session the case about the CFO, right? Now, if I am a person who's employed at a company, right, and if one of my colleagues is a deep fake or is not a deep fake or an online meeting, now how do I tell? How would I ensure that this person is a deep fake or not? For that, we have to bring deepfake detection to the consumers as well as to enterprise level as well. So, for example, if I get a message, I get a video from a friend saying that he needs to borrow, $1 million from me. Let's suppose. Now, if he's a good friend,
You know what kind of
if he's
friend
a
you have, Daniel, but I want one of those friends. But carry on.
So if he's a good friend, I just send it right away. But what if it's a deep fake, and what if he's a bad actor? Now
Yeah.
for that, you can obviously check that video if it's deep fake or if it's an authentic video.
Yep.
You'll probably be saved a lot of money by then, right? So
Well,
you have no idea what sort of phishing attacks, what sort of deepfake attacks are happening out there every single day on social media, on personal communication channels, on different platforms.
yeah. Clearly, your disposable income is at the next level compared to the rest of us. So,
Uh,
Daniel,
you
you
know,
and I are going to
mention
be firm friends after this. Hey, Daniel, send me $1 million. Okay. But it's actually interesting because, and I don't want to kind of make this into kind of bring it away from the real life situation we're facing and then say, oh, make it Hollywood. But there was actually a really brilliant movie last year I watched called Thelma, where there was this elderly lady in America, and she got a telephone call supposedly from the police station that was her son, or her grandson, and he had been arrested for, let's say, I don't know, a driving offense. And she needed to quickly send money as a bond to get him released from prison because he didn't want to call his parents because he knew that they would, there would be a problem for them. So she, as the grandmother, she immediately transferred the money or dropped. She dropped the money physically off into a PO box at the local, I don't know, post office for the payment to the law for the bond. And obviously, there's a lot of red flags through this. But this, again, is a vulnerable person, an elderly person. And that person on the telephone sounded exactly like her grandson. So she wasn't questioning this. And this was a imperative. I need this right now. This is an emergency. And so this is for kind of the family safeguard as well element. There's a really, really important aspect of where we need to build clear kind of standards within our own homes in terms of privacy with what our children and what we are actually openly sharing on social media, which could then be used as a potential, fraudulent attempt against our own families, as you rightly said in the situation of your friend. So I think it's really, really important as well that we also consider and begin exploring the need for us to have deepfake detection functionalities within our own devices. And that's actually something, I suppose, that will evolve as we move forward, because this is going to be quite sophisticated. In the instance of Thelma, when she discovered that it was a scam, she decided to take it upon herself and to find out the perpetrator. And it's a brilliant movie because this is an elderly woman in her late 80s. But it just shows you the true reality that this is a day-to-day thing that's impacting people. So go ahead, Daniel, please.
You mentioned about the movie. I also recently saw I think one of documentaries or something in Netflix. I think that was about a year or two ago, named Tinder Swindler.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so you saw that as well, right? So, for that, you can obviously imagine, right, in dating apps, right? That is also one of the biggest industries where deepfakes could potentially, harm you as well. Like, not just financially, but, could be an actual life-threatening situation if the person who's supposed, he's saying, or he or she is saying he or she is, but, it's a different person altogether. So they can easily impersonate someone else, and then there's no check. So how do you ensure that the other person is exactly the same that they are claiming to be.
Yep. In fact, Becky Holmes, she's a UK author. She's written an amazing book called Keanu Reeves is Not in Love with You. And it is actually to this very point about deep fakes being used in romance scams. And to be honest, she is a phenomenal and absolutely hilarious speaker. But what she does is she actually brings the hilarity of when we're all watching this, we're all kind of laughing, but to the psychology element of where individuals involved in this, they generally create psychological, romantic, emotional bonds with these deep fakes. And then you begin to see the entire psychological manipulation that happens, which isn't funny and is very serious. And it is, for us, when we're looking at this, it's a pandemic at the moment that we're facing. And apparently Keanu Reeves is the most used celebrity in deepfakes. So if he contacts you or any of your friends, not that he's going to contact you, Daniel, but any of your female friends, just say it's not the real Keanu Reeves. But she's also had other people.
It's just like, Harry Potter and the Diary of Tom Riddle, right? So, you don't know who you're talking to.
Exactly. And that's the honest truth, and this then brings us to trust and transparency. And that's also been mentioned like in a number of the chats in the discussion room today while we've been talking. And a lot of what you're saying really is resonating with our attendees in terms of, okay, this is a bigger problem than we ever understood. And it is about detection, but trust. I'm somebody that would give trust easily, but once broken, that's it's a very Irish, I think it's very green today, very Irish approach. But we can't live in a world where we constantly are questioning the reality of that within which we live. It would drive anybody mad, insane to an extent. So trust and transparency are massive tools and for consumers. If we bring this to Fascia, for example, and the work that you guys are doing, how can Fascia, for example, build credibility outside the enterprise space with consumers, in terms of transparency and responsible disclosure and also compliance alignment with kind of, as we talked earlier about the European AI Act, etc.
So how do you get trust by different consumers? You just need to make them believe that if a person is real, it's a real.
Yeah.
And you just need to limit, or you just don't want to annoy different users. It could be merchant users, it could be end consumer users, any users. You just need to reduce that annoyance level. Now, I don't know if that's the right term, but have that better user experience, as well as ensure that their data, their everything is in safe hands. It's not being misused. It's not being in the wrong hands, right? That's what that's what matters at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
The lower annoyance level and the trust.
So going forward and looking forward, we've got like a minute left. Daniel, we did this on time. Look at us, pros. And the future, are you seeing everyone having deepfake detection in their own pocket, in their devices? Will this become a norm?
So everyone has a cell phone, right? And everyone can create a deepfake with a cell phone. So eventually in the future, I do think that everyone should have a deepfake detection solution in their pocket as well.
Yeah.
Because if everyone has the capability and everyone has access to creating deepfakes, then everyone should have access to detecting those deepfakes as well.
You said it beautifully there, and if I may kind of put that into kind of a quote for you, Daniel, I think we're going to move from a scenario of trust by default to basically verification by default. Where creators, labels, platforms, we scan before we share any information, So I think that exactly what you're saying there, we're moving from that trust by default to verify by default. And I think that's fantastic. And that hopefully becomes the social break on the abuse that we're currently seeing. Daniel, We did it on time. Congratulations. Honestly, the feedback in the chat room about how your comments and your thoughts have been resonating with the attendees has been phenomenal. Everyone's saying it's a great, love the discussion, exactly what Daniel is saying. So really, thank you so much indeed. I really, really appreciate your time. On the back of our discussion today, we will actually produce a thought leadership piece, taking some of the discussions we've had and kind of sending out some really good practical advice on what people, enterprises and consumers can do next on the back of Daniel, what you've been sharing with us and your thought leadership today. So on that note, thank you very much indeed. We will now be welcoming our second guest of the day. But Daniel, I wish you a wonderful day ahead and thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much, Una. Have a good day.
Too, likewise.
I don't drink. 2, I fly on this.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. I am not Morgan Freeman. What you see is not real.
Ever come across a video that just didn't feel right, with no way to tell if it's authentic? That's a thing of the past. With Facia's new online deepfake detection portal, the AI-powered tool detects deepfakes with industry-leading accuracy. This advanced AI scans for signs of deepfakes, including inconsistent eye movement, lighting issues, muscle twitching, and more. Whether you're a business, a news platform, or just someone looking to verify what's real online, Facia's online tool has you covered. Deepfakes are evolving quickly, but you don't have to be left in the dark. Try Facia's deepfake detection tool today.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of day 3. I'm your host Una Vandenberg, and we've been joined now by the absolutely phenomenal and wonderful Swati Dave, all the way from Singapore. So thank you for bearing with us, especially with the time difference. Who is working at Flutterwave, I believe, in risk analytics currently. So Swati, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself before we jump into further discussions around kind of AI in financial crime?
Yeah, hi Ona, thank you for having me. So my name is Swati Dave. Yeah, a little bit different. It's not Dave, Dave.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay. And I bring over 16 years of experience. So I left Flutterwave and I'm looking for new, and I'm doing freelancing. So I have experience in the risk and compliance analytics across banks and financial services, even e-commerce, and it is spanning across various geographies like Southeast Asia, Africa, US, and UK. And I think I work in the intersection of compliance, data, and AI. And this is helping the financial institutes use, advanced analytics to strengthen their financial crime defense, as well as, the risk management framework. And I'm particularly passionate about leveraging data-driven strategies and emerging technologies to empower the risk and compliance team so that they could build more resilient organizations. So I'm excited to discuss further.
No, me too. And AI is no longer a nice to have in financial crime defense. It's actually becoming a regulatory grade capability. And we have seen even last week with Wolfsburg coming out to say, we need to see behavioral analytics within transaction monitoring, which, AI is an umbrella term, as is financial crime, for a subset of a multitude of different functionalities and typologies. And even with the AI Act, which is now enforced with phased obligations, it's going to shape, for example, in Europe, how banks design, document, and govern AI in financial crime tools and controls. And even, back in January this year with DORA, it forced hardened ICT resilience, third-party cloud providers, and maintaining registers of information, which directly impact how, model operations, data pipelines, and case management and uptime requirements for AML and fraud. And obviously on the threat side, we have just seen a significant increase in the amount of basically threats from illicit actors. Even in the UK alone last year, I think the losses for, authorized push payment fraud was somewhere in the region reported around 450 million. And the challenge there is, whilst that was a 2% year-on-year decrease, that is only what's been reported. There is a lot of stuff that goes unreported because people are embarrassed about the fact they've been impacted by fraud, they've been scammed. So what does this mean, Swati, for analytics teams? AI isn't just about pattern spotting, it's about real-time analytic detection, behavioral biometrics, understanding real data within organizations. Can you talk to us just a little bit about, from a regulatory perspective and also from a threat perspective, and the increase in the number of threats and sophistication of threats, what you're seeing in today's financial crime environment?
Right. I think you touched a very critical point at this, because AI is there, and currently AI is in its hype cycle. It's at the peak of it. So, everybody is jumping into the wagon. So I think for organizations, it's very important to plan and have to have a very clear use case, why they want to use AI, what is the objective they are, they are thinking of getting out of it. Because if they are just going to spend money, but without getting real ROI, I think that that's what we are seeing, right? Like 95% of the AI projects are now reported to fail because they have not been implemented with proper objective from the get-go. So yes. I think that's one of the clear things which all the organizations who aim to adopt AI should, and it's imperative, even when as a student, if you do a research, you have to have your problem statement cleared out. So I don't understand why organizations don't do it first when they're implementing such a huge scale project with such huge amount of volume involved. So that is one thing. And I think one of the key things which I feel AI with the invent of RAG, which is retrieval augmentative, that is something which is very key. And I think that is something which, the regular AI, they can enhance it with their localized or the proprietary data along with the external data they are getting from these LLM models, and strengthen their fraud detection or machine learning or supervised learning, all these models with the RAG system in place, so that they are able to uncover hidden patterns, like unusual account linkages or the transaction flows. So I think RAG is something which is very critical if anyone who is using AI or plan to use it. And another key thing would be the MCP, which will make their AI models more explainable, because these are agents and they would make it more explainable, which will not only be, helpful for the investigator who is working on the output of or analyzing the output of these models. It would be also for the, for the audit purposes or for the regulatory explanations or regulatory reports. So I think this is very critical along with, when you're using AI along with these. So And also, I must say that when I talked about RAG is like you're having proprietary data, which would include your transactions, but you can also, include your policies, guidelines, and also plug in the, evolving policies, because, the regulatory landscape is evolving every day and it's dynamically changing. So if you imagine, if you feed this along with your real-time data and along with the macroeconomic information, and then you power those models to return you interpretations or insights, that would be so powerful. So, but I must add, though it's very exciting, it's in the nascent state. So you need to give this baby time to grow up, mature, and before you start, using it.
Yeah. I say I lived in Singapore for 6 years, so I'm just going to make a quick joke saying, how can you tell that Swati is from Singapore without saying she's from Singapore? Every single 3-letter acronym that you threw into that discussion. In Singapore, we love a good 3-letter acronym for everything, whether it's the ECP, etc. So thank you for that. It just made me laugh. That was one of my favorite things about Singapore. We have an acronym for everything. But you're absolutely right. AI is in its absolute infancy in terms of its functionality, its capabilities, its use cases. And it was actually interesting. On day one of the summit, Adam McLaughlin from Finergo made this really important point, and which I couldn't agree with more, and really resonated with the whole discussion we've been having these 3 days, which is, don't just deploy tech for the sake of deploying tech. First, you need to figure out what your problem statement is, and then understand the available solutions for your problem statement. And a lot of organizations are jumping into, well, we need AI. Well, why do you need AI? Because we need it. Everybody's talking about it. And as you rightly pointed out, those implementations are failing because we haven't actually built them on the right foundation. We haven't actually taken a step back, used informed management information, informed MI on understanding our top and emerging risks, cleaned up our data internally, and then understood really where our clear and present danger is within our organizations, and then how we can better mitigate those risks. And if that is through the deployment of a subset of AI functionality, fantastic. Let's start working on that. But don't just jump in the deep end and say, well, we need LLMs, like large language models, or we need behavioral analytics. That's all well and good, but you need to start, this process starts at a very different point. It starts with the necessity, then to the cleaning of the data, then to, well, is this the right solution for the problem? And then what are the possible solutions available? And as you rightly pointed out, and as I've already said, that is why so much AI implementation to date hasn't met its true potential, because the precursor to the getting it right hasn't been in place. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, or if you're seeing that as well in the market.
Yes, definitely. What you're saying is truly what's exactly happening. Having worked in the analytics space, I'm seeing organizations still struggling to do the basic MI. I'm not going even to the analytics. Yeah. Even the MI are lagging because the data, there are so many data silos. And if you are in a multinational company, or you are in a company which works across geographies, every business unit or entity is in a different system or a platform. And the data engineers are still struggling to bring everything into one place so that they can have a holistic view, even like for the risks. So since I work for risk and compliance, giving a holistic view of the risk is becoming challenging. Yep. And your AI is solely, it's like solely dependent on data. If your data is not right, it won't give you, because AI is no magic wand. It is powered by your data, how clean, how organized, and how consistent your data is. Yep. If it is not, then the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. That's exactly what it will do. And that's why currently you are seeing a lot of hallucination, which is partly because of the data is not right, and also partly because the technology is not mature. But
Absolutely.
this is exactly what we are seeing right now.
And many organizations, apologies my voice, many organizations are swimming in data. I refer to them as data sewage pits, where we have multiple sources of the truth. And this really fundamentally came to a kind of the importance of it for me when I was at HSBC, and we were simultaneously rolling out global standards within financial crime, whilst working through the deferred prosecution with the US Department of Justice. And suddenly, not suddenly, but what we were trying to achieve was understanding the top and emerging risks across a multitude of business lines operating in siloed pillars across multiple countries within multiple regulated jurisdictions. And let's take APAC as an example. When you're operating in a large financial institution in APAC, you're operating across approximately 17 different regulated countries. And they may as well, as Paul Jeftovich said to me once, we may as well be in 17 different worlds, because a lot of those regulations, there is interoperability between them because of language conventions and just fragmentation of the regulation. So that's just an APAC problem. Then you expand that globally across operations across, Europe and the Middle East and Africa, US, LATAM. It is a minefield. And that data, what you're trying to do is pull data from your pillars within the business, operating across multiple jurisdictions that are facing different internal and external exponential threats. Then trying to understand at a local level, well, for this business line in this country, what is, based on the data you're seeing, what is your top and emerging risk? Okay, if you take that business line to let's say a regional level, let's say APAC, well, what does that say? Does that change your top and emerging risks if you take it in combination with other countries' MI? And does that change my computer likes to zoom in on me when I get excited. Does that change your top and emerging risk viewpoint for that business line at a regional level? And then at a global level, taking all of the various regions together, looking at your top and emerging risks geographically across the globe, how does that then change the ratings of your top and emerging risks in terms of what is the critical focus areas for executive leadership to be focusing? Where do we need to be spending money and resources right now in order to effectively fix a top or indeed emerging risk? And when you put it in that context, I hope that everybody who's listening today will understand this is not a simple solution. This is not this is to fine-tune your MI to that extent is a labor of love and requires significant data analytics and investment. And it probably will take you the best part of 6 to 9 months to really get that fluidly working when you have multiple business lines incorporated within that as well. And to your point, Swati, MI, the amount of times I go into an institution and I say, okay, can I see the most recent MI? And it should, for me, MI should be something that's not static, but I should be able to generate that every single day just to compare it like with what I saw last week or even yesterday. The number of organizations I walk into and they don't even have that, but yet they want to jump into AI. And it's like, guys, cart before the horse. Sorry. So I should pass this over to you because I get very excited about this because I've lived and breathed it. And I've been through the entire upheaval of which, and HSBC is probably a very specific example because and did they successfully achieve it? 100% yes. Have they rolled out some incredible AI functionality? Google AI spoke for itself. They publicly spoken about how they were able to identify complex networks in their books as a result of that deployment. But that deployment required an entire cleanup of data to create one source of the truth across a multitude of jurisdictions, and not even just jurisdictions, systems internally that existed with multiple sources of the truth.
Absolutely. And I think technology, as you rightly pointed out, having a clean data, creating, data pipelines, which are, because what you cannot have a complete overhaul. So the approach here should be, like a modular. Pick up the pain point or pick up a process which is more repetitive. Like, I think JP Morgan Chase did a very good job with their Coin platform where they automated the legal document reviews, right, using AI. So where, their teams were spending weeks to review and scan through all the documents. So their analysis time was cut through. And I think right now, when I read the report, it was like near zero error rates. So this is the kind of transformation we are talking about, like go modular by modular, like go to one process module, implement it, do heavy testing on those deployments. And once it is rolled out successfully, then move forward. So I think this is something which they have to, companies need to take, in cognizance with when moving out with these technologies. And I think other use cases which I'm hearing about and which I saw was in the transaction monitoring, where, certain tools like Tukataki and they're using FinSense for monitoring, assessing the transaction monitoring, so which is real time, right? So it's helping them to flag and also even prioritize the, the flags, the false positives which are raised. They will give a score, and then they could, they can flag it to the investigator to and prioritize it for them. So they're like, this flag needs you to look urgently. So these are kind of things which currently a few of the industries, organizations are doing it. And I think this is something which I hope, and I'm pretty much sure that it would improve as we progress, because the pace at which AI is evolving is massive.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the most important point here, that the speed of evolution in the use cases by illicit actors is also is exponential. Okay, so current challenges in financial crime analytics. We've talked about already the scale and the fragmentation of data, siloed KYC, payments, screening, device, etc. We've talked about regulatory and liability shifts. Well, we talked about the APP fraud there earlier. Enforcement pressure. We've seen that, for example, in the UK, that the FCA fined, for example, Starling Bank, 29 million pounds for sanction and screening control failures. And in the US, obviously, the Binance resolution came out at approximately 4.3 billion. Plus, obviously, they were then put under a monitorship. We all love a good monitorship. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt. But it shows how regulators are penalising weak control design, scaling, and governance. And as I mentioned last week, Wolfsburg came out saying we need to have AI in transaction monitoring for behavioural analytics. Do you expect to see rising expectations from regulators across the globe, and it'll follow suit? I know the MAS are incredible in this, in respect of sandboxes and supporting AI development. I've seen this, from the early days. But where do you think we're going to see real regulatory shifts and governance expectations, and also knowledge and understanding of AI functionalities and the needs within organizations?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the expectations which organizations are having before they jump into the AI bandwagon. That's what exactly they are. So I think there are few companies who have taken the right approach like for example, PayPal, they are using cutting edge graph database technology to analyze the complex, interconnected real-time data. They use visual map relationships, to identify high risk indicators, and that would be, impossible to spot manually. So in my when I was working in Gojek, we did use graph technology, and we could, see map the device and the transaction, where they're originating and how the money is flowing. And it was, we were able to track find the anomaly where it was having. So I think AI can flag suspicious activity as it is happening. Like for example, if there are any sudden large transfers or there are unusual cross-border movements. So all these things, machine learning algorithms, these need to be continuously fed, and they need to learn new fraud tactics. So they are always evolving. So I think one of our clients also use Hawk AI, and they saw like 70% reduction in their false positives. So that's a huge, because it means investigators can focus on real threats instead of chasing the ghost. But I must say, because you raised the point of regulators, so whenever they are implementing any AI solution, make sure those are explainable AI solutions, because it cannot, the trust in the AI would never be there if it's like a black box. So you need to have the model context protocol like MCP, which could explain, what the model did. So, the traditional model, MLs have been there for quite some time. So what AI is doing is that ML kind of used to help you, detect these patterns and all those things. But what AI is helping is even to discern what these ML models did. And also, kind of couple it with other kind of external multiple sources to make those predictions more accurate. And with MCPs, they would be more explainable, and there would be audit trails, proper audit trails for the investigators and for the regulatory reporting or audit reports. So I think that is key. If these explainable AI is not implemented, I think that is where the companies or the organizations are losing trust on AI, because they say, I don't know why it showed this. That is the question you don't want to be on the other side of. No, you need to know why your model had said false positive, or why it is calling it as an anomaly.
I have to say, did my good friend Robin Lee give you a backhander to mention Hawk AI and name drop it today? A wonderful individual, a very good friend of mine, as you probably know. So, but honestly, the AI service provider vendors that we're seeing in the market at the moment, I'm just continually impressed with them and what they can do. And it's really a game changer for our ability as SMEs to focus on the real risks, whilst the system actually does some of the precursor day-to-day analytics for us to escalate the real risks to us that we need to see. So if we could move on to, we talked about AI's role in strengthening financial crime defense. We've mentioned transactional and behavioral analytics at scale. I also mentioned this in respect of, the HSBC example with Google AI. There actually was a statistic for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We have seen an 86% increase of adoption of AI functionality within financial crime detection in 2024 alone, which is phenomenal. Although I would like to look at those stats to understand exactly where that's being deployed, because I'm curious. Predictive risk scoring and network detection, complex networks, which we'd never see. In the UK, we've actually seen an amazing project between the UK FCA and the Bank for International Settlements, Project Aurora, looking at machine learning where it's looking for clusters and synthetic data to enable cross-firm learning under privacy constraints. Cosmic, a great example in Singapore of data sharing, which is then allowing us to take that data and to do proper analytic investigations using AI components to look for connections between organizations. And I have to say, and I mentioned this yesterday, for me, Stroll's, the FIU kind of reporting system in Singapore, still to this day is a standout global leader for me in terms of how they've managed to streamline the submission of data and then used and deployed AI functionality in the background to look for common synergies between different reporting from different organizations. And Cosmic is only going to amplify this public-private partnership functionality, in my opinion. I don't know if you have anything to talk to on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think right now, Cosmic, like 6 banks are the partners in that. And imagine, so let's move to not just banks. Just think of like within a bank. What if a husband and wife, open an account and they share, in the account opening, they share the same home address. Okay. And one has a corporate account, another has a retail account. Imagine if within the bank, the corporate institution and the retail, they share this information, how rich customer information they would get, or a view of the same, same set of customers they would get. So imagine, extrapolate it, if across banks, if this kind of data sharing, of course, keeping privacy in mind, if that is there, how powerful, information banks would get, financial institutes would get in order to, put right governance in place or have a rich risk assessment for these accounts. So I think Cosmic is really one of the very good examples which you have raised right now. And I think one of the challenges, I think, which we did not cover and I want to highlight is, the talent.
Absolutely.
The lack of the talent which we are lacking right now for using these sophisticated tools. We are just doing the catching up game. And I think companies, they need to invest on their talent to keep them abreast with these AI changes. So you are seeing almost all company I hear, they have a Copilot launched. But ask them, have you taught the employees prompt engineering, how to use those Copilots? Because these Copilots right now are hallucinating at a very huge scale. But because you need to teach your employees to prompt, so that these co-pilots learn from these prompts which are given by their employees so that they can enrich the model. So this is something I feel, there is a talent gap and we desperately need people, and not just like prompt engineering and all, you need cross-skilling. So for example, if you have a compliance professional, and you have a tech professional. Now this age, there is no, like you just not expert. You need to be a T-shaped professional where you know compliance and you also know technology, so that in order to use technology so that you can prevent or implement compliance, efficiently. And similarly, tech person, they need to upskill to know business which they are catering to. And, techno-functional people are like unicorns. They're rare and they're expensive. And, this is where I think we are seeing, the analysts are burning out and you have slow adoption of these new technologies. So I totally feel that this is where I think organizations need to also invest apart from the technology they are trying to implement.
Absolutely. And something, you hit the nail on the head there. And I have to say, I'm one of those individuals who, I'm not saying I'm a unicorn, but as I lift up my unicorn, Starbucks cup. But one of the things that I found incredible when I stepped into working in a crypto firm, was that I was actually put in as a chief platform officer. So day to day, I was overseeing the roadmap with the engineers, working with the engineers, back end, front end, QA, understanding the kind of the initial spikes on the APIs to how we were developing new innovative components, and then building those out to drive through to deployment. And it was a massive eye-opener to me as a risk professional, because working with engineers required a completely different mindset than in risk management, and with my training, we're designed to solve problems, and that's what we do. You give me a problem statement and I will come up with solutions A, B, C, all the way through to Z, and then you choose which one, we'll go with that, and then we'll work around roadblocks, etc. What engineers do is they're actually continually looking for a problem in the solution, because that's how they're working. They're constantly looking for the break in the code, where the error is. And it was just so incredible to work alongside the engineers. And I just felt so unintelligent by comparison to these individuals, like absolutely phenomenal, some of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Okay, we're zooming in again. I make a big statement, we zoom in. Just so intelligent, mathematical, analytical minds, and that are constantly thinking on, okay, so this is the problem statement, and they're constantly thinking to solutions. And exactly to your point, we need to incorporate skill sets and blend skill sets for collaboration between engineering and risk management. If I'll be honest, going forward, if I walked into a compliance department as a CCO or as an MLRO, and I sat down and I was going to be discussing kind of the roadmap for the year ahead, and I didn't have an engineer sitting at my table, I already know that I'm dead in the water. I need an engineer. I need a data analyst. I need an SME. I also potentially need somebody who has public sector knowledge and understanding of the evolution of typologies and threats, so that we can really get it right in that discussion. And I need that blend of skill sets and people. And as you rightly said, to expect all of those in one person, you're looking for a unicorn. Like, I can't code, I can't build systems, but also making sure these teams can collaborate and work together is essential. And what's really important is understanding the differences in mindsets and approaches of each of these individuals, and then appreciating how that brings the healthy challenge within the discussions to create the innovation that we need. But no, I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and I couldn't agree with you more. There is a significant amount of training and development that's needed. Singapore actually is a really great example here. I believe, was it last year where they rolled out the over 40 payment? I think it was $2,000 were given to every person, including PRs over 40.
Skill Future.
Yeah, to go and reskill, in particular in technology, in AI, because they were concerned that existing education may be outpaced, or existing knowledge and education may be outpaced with the advancement of technology. That's a great example of future-proofing your nation for the future of technology. And I'm yet to see other countries following suit in such an important time, and it's such an important point in time as we're facing now. So in my opinion, Singapore is really setting itself up to continue to be the market leader in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with a non-profit organization here where, you can freelance and interact with the polytechnic students and teach them. So they have programs where they're bringing the professionals who work on the real life use cases to teach at the polytechnic level itself. They are empowering the students, and they are just, maybe it would be heavy for them, and they say from the right and start, but this is just to increase their awareness. That's the goal. So I think it's incredible what they're doing here with the education sector.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I love to hear, Swati, that you're involved in the NGO work. It's something I'm very, very passionate about as well. It's actually, in fact, why we started Raw Compliance, was to bring free and where we need to cover costs, affordable training to individuals to support continuous learning and innovation. So I love that. And I'd love to take that offline and understand more about the work that you are doing, and maybe take a look at it when I'm in Singapore next. So integrating AI into existing compliance frameworks, we have talked about what it's going to take, and the non-negotiables. So, you know, a clear legal basis speaks for itself, but a very fair and proper deployment of an impact assessment to make sure that you really understand the need, the what, the where, the why, and the need. Obviously, legal alignment to evolving AI rules. I have to say, I recently did a comparative analysis, I think I may have mentioned this, between various countries, Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong, US, on developing AI regulation. And I really do like how Singapore has kept it quite principles-based, so it doesn't stifle innovation, whereas the EU has gone for a more pragmatic, very rules-based, in my opinion, quite a solid, inflexible approach, which I worry is going to impact innovation. And also, what the main concern, even when China is, there we go again, make a big statement and I zoom in. What I worry about in particular is the ability to actually, how can I say it, enforce it. Enforcement is going to be challenging, but overcoming barriers, data silos we've spoke about, skills, we've talked about the fusion of teams and the need to pair SMEs with data engineers, investigators, training on governance. But we've not talked about cost, kind of that risk-weighted ROI. You see, there you go, 3-letter acronym, that return on investment. How are firms better going to understand the ROI? It's not going to be an immediate overnight return, but how can they better explore the more medium to longer term effectiveness in terms of both human cost and also the potential reduction in possibly exposing themselves to illicit activity through better tools?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, when they are picking up the module, when I said like have a modular approach, and this is no different from any enterprise-wide implementation where you do a phased rollout, right? So when you are doing a modular approach, pick the module, have a defined objective, like what is the problem statement you are trying to solve, what is the objective, what are the outcomes. So when I say outcomes, those should be measurable outcomes, like, you know, are you expecting reduction in the false positive rate, or are you detecting, are you expecting a rise in the the fraud detection, all these kind of, the risk scores, are you expecting it to be there? So all these things have to be measurable. So I think that would make it, when you're starting, I think very key, because you need to show, as you said, ROI need to be there, right? There for them to get the funding, from the board and all. So if you pick a project, go with all these, like for the OKRs, you have SMART objectives. Same, you need to do it for AI implementation, as have a SMART objective which is measurable, and you have the accountability and all those things in place, so that when somebody asks you what did it achieve, you have metrics to report. And then and surprisingly, data is what buys in as well. It could, if it's wrong, it will tank your projects, but if it is right and if it is convincing, it is the big pusher in convincing the board as well. So and I think that would be the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there. Governance. You need really strict oversight and governance of AI deployment. A lot of a lot of organizations, I mean, I've mentioned this earlier as well, the need for a chief AI officer. That shouldn't be your CTO. That should be somebody standalone that's pragmatically looking across the board holistically, that understands risk management, but obviously understands the need for innovation and how we need to evolve that, and creating that source of the truth within the data and why we're deploying AI and how we're deploying it. That I keep going back to using the word holistic risk management and moving away from silos.
Yes.
We focused on day one on silos and breaking down the silos. And that's not to say that we don't need SMEs for fraud. Am I a massive believer in FRAML, integrating fraud and AML teams? I'm believing that they need to work much better together and share data. But there are different skill sets and components involved here from an SME perspective. But governance is key. And also, very importantly, a lot of organizations, especially TradeFis, are dealing with legacy cores. They're dealing with banking systems and multiple different systems across multiple different risk platforms that have been adopted for various reasons. And some of them we may not even know why, because people who've adopted them have since flown the nest, and there hasn't been sufficient documentation of the who, what, where, when, why, and how decisions. But working with those legacy core systems, some of which will not have the API capabilities to integrate with AI systems because the code is just too outdated. And we need to make sure that we accelerate integration without sacrificing governance, but also without impeding the business BAU. And that is where the AI oversight governance, that AI chief AI officer is really going to come into play. That's going to be fundamentally their job, making sure we're deploying future-proofed technology that is ensuring that it is that we can accelerate the integration of that, but without sacrificing oversight or indeed impacting day-to-day and indeed the user experience, the UX.
Yes, definitely.
So go ahead,
yes,
please go ahead.
No, you said right, like, when I said modular, I also meant that we build solutions which are plug and play. So your pipelines, you build a solution, like, for example, I think Tukitaki, they have those solutions where the APIs can be plugged into the for the transaction monitoring stuff, and then you can implement it in your process where you want to. So I think I think in future we would see rise in such tech companies where they would build, technologies or solutions which are very specific to a use case. And you would be surprised that this is coming out of a very small company, but they would be very sophisticated, and they would be solving a very specific use case for that matter. So I think APIs and, as you said, documentation. So legacy system is lacking documentation, and that's why their integration is, sometimes becoming difficult. Yeah. And you would face this issue if you don't do it for the AI solutions as well. If you don't have the proper documentation and you don't have the proper sandbox environment, and the teams don't test it thoroughly before going live, I think these are the things which are imperative, and I think these are basics for any technological implementation if you don't want to disrupt your business operation.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's very, very well said. So conscious that we have around kind of 12 minutes left, and we really wanted to then kind of look at future-proofing, the future trends and how to prepare. So one of the things that we touched on was a kind of, public-private partnerships. I mentioned, we talked about COSMIC, cross-institutional collaboration, sharing typologies without obviously impacting or sacrificing data protection. How important do you believe that initiatives like COSMIC are going to be for the ways in which we look at AI deployment and use cases as we explore and understand new and evolving typologies?
I think this would be key because this, a connection with, imagine you have an ML or the AI solution, which also feeds from this information, which is centrally collected from all the financial institutes. I think like AFC and all those institutes where they are collecting the emerging typologies, and you're feeding it to the AI solution. It will definitely improve the detect prediction rate and reduce the false positive. So that is something definitely which is there. And I think one of the key things which would see in future, as you like rise of agentic AI systems which drive autonomous compliance action. So for example, they would not only just detect, but you can automatically respond, so in the real time. So imagine the transaction is about to happen, and the agentic AI is able to freeze it or stop that transaction before the funds leave your system. So that is something which we would see. And I think in few cases it has been implemented. I think PayPal has done that. So we would see that. And I think in future, what we are seeing is, I think it would be AI versus AI era. So criminals are also using it, and they are using multimodal generative AI. So that means they are using text, video, voice to make fraud more sophisticated. So we, on the other side, we need to be equally, advanced in detecting these capabilities.
Absolutely. Really, really well said. So we've talked a little bit as well about regulatory governance. And if we look at the AI Act milestones through kind of 2016, my goodness me, 2026, 2027, DORA will be live. And Basel, as we know, is modernizing core principles. Model governance, documentation, instant reporting become audit-ready artifacts. One of the things that I really believe that we need to see more of, and I don't really think it really exists today, is rather than push reporting to regulators, I would actually like to see more pull reporting from entities straight into by regulators for real-time reporting. As I said, financial crime typologies are evolving instantaneously. If we look in the virtual asset space, where virtual assets are involved, the speed at which those monies can be moved when they're involved in illicit activities, it's set up to be instantaneous. So it's taken from one wallet, immediately moved to multiple other wallets, and then multiple other wallets. So it's continually it's gone in a split second. So we really need both better, I would say, pull reporting by the regulator and by law enforcement from the banks in consideration of data protection, to basically understand, where the real threats are evolving within the banking books at the moment. But second to that as well, the banks need much more updates from law enforcement on evolving typologies that are happening in the market. And, and we need the regulation to then, I talked about this yesterday, AI, artificial intelligence is borderless. It doesn't have borders. It is an ecosystem. And similar to the kind of the DeFi space, it's an ecosystem globally. So when you look at regulation, we can't fragment regulation by jurisdiction, by countries. We need a global standardized approach to regulation in this space, not an EU Act or Singapore or China or US or Hong Kong. We need a global standard. And so I'm looking to the likes of Basel, or indeed FATF in the financial crime space to really pick up that gauntlet and better support practical AI development oversight within our space, so that it puts us all on equal footing and doesn't impact rollout of AI within organizations globally. Because the problem with fragmented AI regulation is what will work in one country, for example, Singapore, may not work in, let's say, for example, Portugal or the UK because of the fragmentation. So it's going to be really interesting. AMLA, I believe and I understand one of their first roles will be harmonization of the European FIUs. So, we're looking at harmonization across, 26 countries of FIUs. And that is an incredible opportunity for AI functionality and data and collaboration. And I think that what we all now need to do, and FATF needs to do, is to look to that as a model and see how we can then take that model and roll it out in a global stratosphere, so to speak. I don't know what your views are on that.
No, definitely. That is something which is the current challenge, where the regulations and policies are fragmented. So when I was working with Flutterwave, you have within Africa itself 40 plus countries, and you have different regulations over there. So you are struggling to keep up with, and whenever you're launching in any market, or when you are thinking of expanding, you have to look at all the all the regulations by the particular monetary authority. So I think having a standardized, at least an overarching rule, which could help at least in building the foundation. And then, of course, you can have those nuances based on the geography and definitely the business or the sector you are catering to. But I think a standardized one, a basic standardized approach or a policy from the regulators would definitely help financial institute to just get started and not lag behind. Because you see, we are being pulled back by these regulations, but the bad actors are not. They are using it because they don't have to think about the committees or anything. They are using these AI sophisticated tools to, to fraud our systems. So I think what you said is completely makes sense.
Perfect thing. Well, I have to say we're nearly at the hour. We've got a few minutes left. One of the things I would say is, firstly, in the chat room, it is phenomenal. The conversation is, our attendees are actually now having their own discussions about what we're discussing. So that's great. As long as they're not discussing their dinner plans, we know we haven't lost them. So definitely engagement has been there, and that's great. One of the things that we're actually going to do after today's session is we're going to provide a team prep checklist based on the conversation that Swati and I've been having. Is we're going to actually roll out a kind of a checklist on how organizations can prepare themselves for AI deployment before what are the precursors that we discussed about to that deployment, and then when we're looking at the actual use cases, what we need to be doing in those discussions to understand the best opportunities for rollout. So I think we've talked as well about enforcement, and we've looked at the market signals are there. We've seen the Starling Bank, enforcement, rapid growth outpaced controls. Actually, Coinbase had the same enforcement action in the US only a couple of years ago. You build a system.
4, I think, or 3, yeah.
You build a system that's good for today, and that's great. But financial crime doesn't stand still, and as your business and your products and your services and your distribution channels and your service channels, as they increase in sophistication and diversification, so must all of your control systems in supporting that. And we saw in Coinbase and in Starling that neither of them had prepared themselves optimally for that. And looking at the architecture and the controls at risk, that is why risk assessments cannot be static documents. And number of times I go into firms and I'm like, so where's your risk assessment? And people have to hunt about for it. And I'm like, this is literally like, me going into the kitchen and asking, where's your pots and pans to cook with? That's the base point to me. The meal. The base point to your AML framework is your risk matrix, and the amount of time then I understand people can't read it because they haven't prepared it internally. They brought in external consultants, and then seeing that it's actually mapped. I'm so passionate about this. It's mapped from regulation, not from inherent risks, and that really frustrates me. It's like, guys, the regulation isn't your starting point. It's guidance for you. It's supposed to help support you in what you should do when implementing your controls, But you need to identify your risks first and foremost before you go back, well, since we have XYZ permissions, these are the applicable regulations, so this is what I need to do. It's not a tick box exercise, and we've really got that wrong. But obviously we've seen, Binance as well, weak sanction AML controls in the view of the Department of Justice, and monitorship obviously being applied. This really is a blueprint for crypto compliance uplift. And I also believe the Coinbase case was also a very good example of the importance of, once you've got your approval, it doesn't stop there, which unfortunately some firms are of the opinion. But last but not least, increasing fraud typologies. So I think the enforcement and the marginal signals are there in terms of, as we've always done, take enforcement when it's not against, well, if it's against yourself, you definitely would. Take enforcement as an early warning that you need to check that you don't have the same problem. It's that's kind of the 101 of compliance. If it's somebody else's problem, I'm going to quickly look under the hood of my car and check my engine before I have an opinion on anyone else. So just to
I think, sorry, I just wanted to add one thing when you talked about the risk assessment and all. And I think increasingly I'm also seeing firms, and I think there is a need, like when you do a new product launch, you have the new product risk assessment. Take AI implementation as a new product risk assessment, do the new product risk assessment, and have a risk and a compliance officer on the table when you are building that product, so that when the AI product is rolled out, it is not an afterthought that, oh, I didn't think about this risk aspect or this compliance aspect when I was rolling out this product. I think this is something which need to be embedded in the process itself, the change management process. And also, I think there is an increasing fear among the people, the human resource aspect of it, like, my jobs are going. I think you need to also think about how you're going to manage this change. What is the change management culture you are implementing, so that you have the confidence of the employees as well. So that when you are rolling these AI products, you have full support, not just of your investors or board or your tech team, but even the first and the second line who are going to use it. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think I just wanted to add that to the point.
My biggest bugbear is when compliance officers don't understand products and services, because that is your 101. That's where your risk fundamentally starts. You can rhyme off everything to me about clients and geographic risk and industry risk that you want. But the amount of times where I say about fundamentally, what is the inherent risk in the product? Can you explain the product to me? And that's where the diversity of skill sets within a compliance officer is fundamental. We're not expected to go out there on the trading floor and sell the product and operate trading systems day to day or whatever products that we're using. But we are expected to have a fundamental understanding of the risk exposure the product brings to the organization and how we've appropriately mitigated that risk, working with our respective, partners in risk, such as operational risk, credit risk, and market risk. So couldn't agree with you more. So just then wrapping up today's session, obviously AI is now regulated in its capacity, but we have a long road to go to get this right. It needs to be at a global level, which we discussed. Resilience is mandatory. We've seen that under DORA, which operationalized ICT risk and third-party control. Cost of failure is rising. We've talked to the enforcement actions. We need to build real-time human-centered defenses against frauds and evolving scams with the right skill sets, and as you have rightly said, with the right people at the table. Data is the moat. It is basically, imagine AI as the kind of as the castle. The moat around the castle is your data. That's your defense mechanism. That if that moat isn't deep enough, or it's crocodile infested, you're going to have some problems. I never thought that I would go there with an analogy today, but there you go, crocodile cities. We just before our session, we talked about deep fakes. And there are adversities to AI use cases as well, which is deep fake driven social engineering and synthetic identity. So we need to pair, liveness and behavioral biometrics with anomaly detection across channels for this to really work fundamentally. So Swati, I'll pass it to you, Swati, for your final thoughts and final takeaways before we round up today's session.
Thanks, Orna. It was such a wonderful discussion. I think the future of financial crime prevention is exciting, but it's equally challenging because it's not just for the financial institutes, but also for the bad actors. So while the financial institutes are detecting and preventing fraud, and this will require a thoughtful implementation and strong governance, and continuous adaptation, because as you said, fraud typologies are evolving, and the organizations that succeed will be those that view AI not just as like a silver bullet, but they view it as a tool that enhances human expertise, and they are strengthening the overall defense system. So I think we have to remember the human element. Criminals will use AI, but they will still try to exploit the human psychology, but build defenses that account for both technical and human vulnerabilities. I think this is key for the next gen of financial crime prevention, which we are looking at.
Amazing. I couldn't have rounded it up better myself. So on that note, we are finished day 3, and it actually brings us to the conclusion of our 3 days of 360 Compliance Virtual Summit. As I said at the beginning of the session, when this was initially kind of presented to me a few weeks back, I really didn't think that we could pull this off. But this is a testament to the AML Watcher marketing team, because my goodness me, this was a rabbit out of a hat. I can't believe how brilliantly this has gone. The discussions have been amazing. The engagement in the comments has been just phenomenal. I am so energized from these sessions every day. As Jody very kindly said there, they're really, really been thought-provoking. And that's down to yourself, Swati, Daniel, Rory, Adam, all of our other guests over the past few days that have really taken the time to come and talk with us and really help us to understand and articulate the real challenges presenting themselves today and how we future-self ourselves for tomorrow and our organizations. So on that note, Swati, a massive thank you to you. Secondly, a massive thank you to all of our attendees who have come back day after day, because I keep seeing familiar names in the chat rooms. And most importantly, a massive thank you to AML Watcher, who without this wouldn't have been possible. And a big shout out to B, the marketing team at AML Watcher, for just basically owning this and absolutely, it's been astonishing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I can't wait for us to bring back another session. And Swati, once again, thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you.
Here's to the Watchers. Surface, who look past the ordinary and into the heart of compliance. The ones who stand at the line between compliance and chaos. They don't blink. They're the ones who know that compliance is not just a checkbox. It's a commitment to a safer, more transparent financial system. They are the trailblazers of AML compliance, the ones who ensure that every risk stays visible. Here's to the AML Watchers, the ones who protect the system